All right. Looks like we're online there in YouTube. I'll grab that link and we'll share that.
Cool.
We're still setting up this process. We're testing out a new process for the clusterfuckers today.
As if the clusterfuckers have any process whatsoever.
Right, because that's the whole point, right? Is that we're not putting anything together. We're showing how everything is a clusterfuck in life, and we're demonstrating that through our own weekly episodes.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
anyway, what do you think we should talk about? I'm going to send out a tweet. You can pick that up once I let you know it's out. Uh,
I just want to run with this idea of kind of like the clusterfuckers just applying to everything. So I think like we should even just change mediums every week to the point where sometimes we should just write to all of our fans like letters with like a script of our show instead and just keep changing. No, sorry, I'm joking. Um, what should we talk about this week? I mean, Afghanistan is still looking like a pretty big topic. I mean, we've got more climate stuff. I mean, since the oil and gas industries kind of went into overdrive since the IPCC report, we've got some pretty big clusterfucks this week.
that's absolutely true. Well, I think it's evident that you know things in Afghanistan. It's just a matter of excuses and passing the buck, and both sides got filthy rich off of the endeavor. And while some may have postured for against the war, most of them that did at the time were relatively for it. I mean, in the United States anyway. And now that they're pulling out, they're like last minute ditch out. Well, nobody knew that it was only going to take 11 days for the Taliban to take over after they basically made an agreement with them and left all their fucking military equipment and resources behind for them to take over.
Yep.
It was a surprise. Surprise. Well, that was one of the many scenarios, they say. Well, if it was one of the many scenarios, then you guys failed to prepare for one of the many scenarios in your exit plan. I mean, there's nobody saying that we should continue to have stayed over there. We shouldn't have been over there to begin with. But once you butt your nose in, it's like if there's bullies terrorizing the school, and then big brothers come in and they start pushing and we're going to have changes around here, and they start setting all these rules and they start bullying the bullies, and then the bullies feel targeted and oppressed, and then all of a sudden the big brothers say, all right, we're off to college, see you guys later. And
yeah,
then they're left to fend for themselves against these now pissed off bullies that they poked with a fucking stick for years. And oh, your big brother's not here to save you anymore. And that's kind of what's happened. So if you get involved, which you shouldn't have, then you got to do the right thing after you've gotten involved. And we haven't done any of that. We've just exploited the whole situation, just like they did back in the 70s and 80s.
So what could we have done, do you think? I mean, we're already obviously not go there in the first place, but sort of right now, instead of pulling out, or even earlier, what could we have done, do you think, to kind of, we've already made the mistake of going in there, how can we make this safe?
Well, when you say we, I mean, I'm supposing, because we're coming from separate areas of the pond, and people who are watching this must understand that we're going to have a diverse or a different viewpoint somewhat on where things are coming from, because here in the United States, the U.S. government can't do a fucking thing to help its own people. So what makes them think they can go into another country and help them set up democracy? We'd have a failed democracy here in our own fucking country. We don't even have a decent proportional representation model. So with the Electoral College, the U.S. Senate is one of the most undemocratic government bodies that we have, and it continues to exist. So when you talk about what could we, who is we? I mean, if you want to talk about what could people have done, as far as liberating people. You know, I mean, that's a philosophical, sociological conversation that we have every day about, you know, freeing people from oppression around the world. Even these mega idiots here who are oppressing people with their, you know, crazy conspiracy theories and religious, you know, Reich bullshit. It's the same thing. So when you want to free people, how do you go about doing that? Most countries decide to do it through military force, and then they leave a failed system behind because they don't have a successful system themselves.
I mean,
So
it's never worked, has it? It's like it's never really been successfully demonstrated. I mean, even going far back to sort of ancient empires and things like that, they've never been able to hold the territory long term. It's so, if we, I don't really see how, obviously, I'm not saying just pull out the way we did, but I don't really see what we could have done there. That's what
right,
because I
well,
mean, the interventionist seems to be saying bring the troops back in to protect women and whatnot. And I mean, that's not going to end well.
right, and so here's the other end of that is how do you deal with fundamentally I mean, so here in the United States we have a group of people, you know, there was a few thousand up at the January 6th insurrection. If you were to multiply that, and, you know, I mean, not everybody who voted for Trump is a mega idiot, right? We understand that. So if you just take that percentage of people who are just radicalized and they there's a church that they have AR-15s, right, in the church. It's like that's part of their worship, right? Those are their swords, they said. And so I consider that kind
Super
of like,
normal.
yeah, really, really outside of the understanding of what those basic principles are actually teaching, right? And that people have radicalized and made them, twisted them to support their own fundamentalism, right? And that exists here, but the percentage of the population here that mindset is indicative of compared to other countries, smaller countries where they're basically theologically based still. And whether it's Islam or Christian based cultures where Catholicism has been, you know, a predominant force of nature for policies and things like that, you still have, you know, these issues. So how do you bring about liberation to people? Because your view of liberation is different, right? Your view of what if they fundamentally are raised in a religious belief system that basically teaches certain oppressions, which most religions do. That's just the basic of it. I mean, women, people who don't believe what you believe, people of other races who are typically outside of your belief system, typically get
It's
pushed
a
off.
oppression of the self as well. I would argue religion, like pretty much all religions, express sort of oppression of the self.
Correct.
If that
So
makes sense.
so when you adopt that, and, you know, like I said, everybody, even people who are in religions, who believe in God and, you know, go to church on Sunday, they may not take it to the radicalness, the radical extreme of what most people believe. If you're in a religion, and I mean, I should say what fundamentalists believe is if you're in this religion, that it's your lifeblood. It's everything about you. You live for that purpose. And so it's kind of hard to rip away from them that kind of lifestyle if they're born into it. I mean, my own fiance that I broke up with was born into Catholicism in the Philippines. And we had discussions about when the Catholic Church came out and admitted to these years of covering up molestation. And I said, how can you still be? And she wasn't even a good Catholic. Like, she didn't even go to mass or anything regularly. She just go to like the holiday processions and things like that. But she would just, you know, that's what it's tradition. That's, you know, whatever. And I'm like, you can let go of
Yeah.
tradition You can evolve beyond what your family raised you in and said, hey, this is what we do. And then I told her, because I'm a former Christian minister. I was an ordained minister back in my early 20s, and I studied the Bible and theology and all that different shit.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's quite interesting.
Most atheists, which I don't want to consider myself atheist in the term that I believe that there's no entity above us. I just believe that we can't define it. We can't define something greater than ourselves beyond what we can imagine. And we try to in these books and with stories, but we can't. So in any case,
we don't rule anything out.
Right. Like, I mean, what I tell people is to our own selves in our own body, we are a God, right? Because they live for us as a purpose. And outside of our body, you know, we are their universe. Outside of our body, they don't exist, or they fall apart, that, you know, to travel from me to you, whatever. If you were to scale back our existence in the universe, how do we know that we're not, you know, Horton Hears a Who? We're not part of a much grander organism that we can't even comprehend. And to that extent, you know, we may or may not have a purpose in that existence. But anyway, all that aside, you know, trying to get her to understand, well, what I told her was, I said, the Catholic Church, the teachings aren't even scripturally based, because I was a scriptural Christian. I mean, I if you're going to, okay, the Bible's the inspired word of God. Okay, what does it say?
So almost like a theoretical Christian.
You know, and so, so when I told her, I said, you know, it was like 2 months later, the Pope and the Catholic Church themselves came out. It was on mainstream news and said that the Catholic Church's doctrines aren't based on scripture, but they're based on tradition. And I just fucking laughed, and I asked her, I said, are you ready to give it up now? And, you know, she still wouldn't. And it just baffles me that people won't get past things when they're presented with evidence that, you know, you've been lied to your whole life. Let it go.
I do get you. I do get with where you're coming from with that. I mean, I suppose people who are religious describe this as a feeling, and it's almost difficult to argue with the feeling because that's so personal to them.
The feeling.
And
I mean, I wasn't.
And I suppose,
yeah,
everybody's had it to a certain extent.
Sure.
And that's what makes us question: is there something more?
I think a lot of it has to do back with the ego. We need to believe that our existence means fucking more than just plowing away for some 9-to-5 job and feeding our kids and fucking dying. You know, that idea that there's much more awaiting me if I just suffer through this. You know, it's just been sold to people for so long, and what religion really originated from, I can picture it. I don't know how to explain how I can picture it, but I can picture the fucking guys sitting around going, oh, these people aren't paying attention. We need to wake some shit up and tell them the gods tell you to behave yourself, because people wouldn't listen. They wouldn't listen to other humans, because why would they? They were the same size, same shape for the most part. And other than some charismatic ability to speak and convince and persuade, they were nobody special. And the salesman of the time sold this idea of, you know, this great and powerful, wonderful being coming and, you know, ruling every bit of your existence and looking over you continuously. Ongoing surveillance. These people were worried about a camera out in public, but they have ongoing surveillance with their God. What?
Sorry, Johnny, 2 seconds. I seem to have had a really bad connection. I'm going to try and reconnect. Just give me 1 second.
Well, I'll keep rattling.
I warned you about how rural my community is, didn't I?
Yeah, well, we have, I mean, I don't live in the city. We've only got about 2,003.
Can you hear?
I can hear you fine. Am I
All
cutting in
right,
and
it
out
just
for
must be
you?
the incoming connection. Yeah, it's just you keep breaking up, but I think it just must be the incoming. I don't think it's your connection though. It's definitely mine. I mean, we've got bad weather here, which is like sounds like something from the Stone Age where we get bad weather and lose the internet.
Well, and we'll see when I play back the YouTube. We'll see what it looks like.
It seems to have stabilized a little bit now.
It
I was
might
just
it
going to
might be.
say, in
Go
terms
ahead.
of what you were saying, in terms of the order of how these events happened, so the guy sits around, he wants everyone to do what he says, so he invents God. Do you think it could have happened where we'd already invented God, not for a nefarious purpose or gods or spirits or something, but a guy
Oh,
just takes
sure.
advantage of it rather than
Sure.
he
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
invents it?
Absolutely. Yeah. It was a hodgepodge. I mean, mankind was spread out all over the planet. I mean, I know that we could probably go back to before recorded history and assume that mankind was looking up at the sky and judging things that were happening and trying to make reason out of them before they were able to make any kind of written recording that we have the ability to go back and try to ascertain what they were thinking. I mean, we assume more than anything. Archaeologists have good evidence of things, but we really do assume how these civilizations lived and thought at those times. We don't really know. Um, and so I totally believe that it was a hodgepodge of different events. Whereas, like you said, somebody like Moses, gods were created long before Moses' time. And so for him to just basically, take the God and start creating all of these rules, that's basically the Mosaic laws were basically like the policies that we live by, the laws that we live by for the Israelites, and things for their day-to-day hygiene were included. If you read Leviticus and Deuteronomy and a lot of the boring stuff in the first part of the Bible, these rules are like explaining people what to do with their excrement and everything, because these tribes of people were living like hordes of mad animals. And so Moses and the priests were like, man, we got to get control of these people. And so he goes and starts with the 10 Commandments, and then the story goes on, but it becomes an issuance of governance.
So
Mankind
is it a
exploiting.
numbers game? Do you
Huh?
think that is it a numbers game? So somehow for well, the vast majority of human history, we lived as hunter gatherers, not really requiring any legal systems. We could organize ourselves without it. And then
I
as
think
soon
we
as
talked
too many
about this
people
on our
get
space, didn't
together,
we?
yeah, well, pretty
150
much
people.
all of my political arguments keep coming back to the same thing: is as soon as society gets so large, it
Yeah.
becomes kind of ungovernable, or sorry, you have to govern it, which makes it inherently unstable.
Right. And I think there may be, I haven't done any, and for folks watching this in the future and that tune in, we're not about going and doing academic research to try to prove some point. I mean, a lot of this stuff I have done a lot of, my own research on, and I've got experience in life. But I'm not looking to prove any points. That's not what this whole gig is about. I mean, we're talking about current events and sharing our input. But I will say this, that in some of my readings and things like that, the number of 150 people making up a tribe, a manageable tribe, an amount of people that typically the normal person could remember and have ongoing relationships with, right? So like all these
Yeah.
followers, I think we talked about this last time, all of our followers on Twitter and Facebook and shit like that. Like I have, I don't know, 1,200 friends, and I've whittled that down. It was like 1,800 or something like that. And a lot of them are whatever on Facebook. And I don't talk to half of those people. It's like the same 10 people I see in my fucking timeline all the time because of the way the algorithms work. So you don't possibly interact with all those people. And then if you let me say it 5 times real fast. If you sat and thought about it, if you went through your timeline, I have 8,000 followers or whatever. I follow 4,000 people. If I were to go through my timeline and try to comment on every one of the people that I followed, it would take me days to at least comment on one of their posts for 4,000 people. Think about just how long it would take you, just a few seconds, how many you could get out if you were just zooming through your whole time.
Yeah,
so it's
if your account was
impossible.
deleted one day and you needed to make a new one, how could you
And
remember?
yeah, but it's impossible for you to interact with that many people and to have that, you know, I mean, I know how things go viral. That's a whole different algorithmic thing. That doesn't mean that's how many people you actually interact with. You know, how many tweets have you seen of people who have like 150 followers and they tweet something out that catches fire and then it's got like 100,000 likes? Well, they still only end up with like maybe 160 followers because a bunch of people, like 100,000 people, don't turn around and follow them on Twitter just because they like that tweet.
Yeah.
So the interaction between people can be seen in all these different trends in society, even with technology. And I believe you're right. I believe that, you know, a smaller groups of people make for better management, if you will. What do you think?
Sorry, Johnny, I've lost you again there. I'll just stabilize in a second.
Yeah, well, can you hear me now?
I can't believe it. I'm actually going to have to move house to make this show a success, aren't I?
Well, you know, we got to get if we can get this streaming thing figured out.
Right, man, if you can still hear me, I'm just going to try and reconnect. If you just give me 1 second. Sorry about this.
Yeah, I can hear you. So, anyway, we're going to work on figuring out how to get this stream working. It's a clusterfuck. That's the show is about. It's about clusterfucks. You know, we know the options out there. I know I could use OSB or OBS. OBS. I know. Yeah.
Hey, man, is that working?
Yeah. What's up, man?
Sorry about this, dude. It's really embarrassing. It's just I live totally in the sticks, as I mentioned.
It's you know, at this point, it's not like we have a huge audience that we're letting down or anything. And one of the things I was going to say, we're just testing this on my channel right now, is, you know, I can set up a YouTube channel for just for the clusterfuckers, and then we can stream directly to it and start populating it with, you know, the episodes as we move on. And there's a pro version of this streaming. I don't know if that'll do anything with connection, but it adds different features for you to bring in like content, and I can share my screen, and you know what happens.
I was just thinking as well, I might be able to just use the 4G on my phone next time. I mean, my girlfriend's upstairs at the moment, but next time I'll arrange it where I'll be up there. And because we get quite good 4G here, strangely, even though we just get terrible normal internet.
So I'm sharing my screen here. So you could be, you know, we could be talking about tweets like Australia has fallen. That's like going, I don't know what that's about, man. That's trending.
Don't say the Taliban have got that far. Sorry, I shouldn't joke about these things.
So anyway, I mean, that's kind of cool that.
Right.
So
I really want to know what the Australia has fallen tweet is now. I'm really curious.
I haven't gotten a clear.
I like the style of this, where we just see something on Twitter and then we talk about it.
Yeah, yeah. And then there's like cat videos or cat is love with cat liquid. Okay. I mean, yeah, if you just click
Oh,
on the trend and go through it, I
oh
don't
man,
know.
this is what I hate about Twitter so much. How it just kind of like mixes nonsense in with important news.
You mean how it's clusterfuck?
Yeah,
Thank
pretty
you.
much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. A little plug for the show there. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I mean, that I thought that was going to be something serious, like I don't know, some kind of like discover of Australia or something, but no, it's really mundane pictures of like food and cats and stuff.
Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, we were basically talking about when a society gets too big. We can trace this all the way back. You know, our conversation's somewhat of a clusterfuck, right? That's how we talk.
Yeah.
Is we were talking about how the Afghani people, what could we have done? And we kind of veered off on how society kind of determines itself, and it gets too big, and you know the idea of religion, people, uh, the mob mentality, the conformity, you know, everybody has to follow suit or, you know, you get exiled. I mean, that's really what it is. So if you're born into a culture or society, if you don't like, I'm a misfit. My friends in high school, my last high school, I went to three different high schools, three different junior highs, 10 different elementary schools or so. Um, my last high school in San Francisco, where I went my junior and senior year, the group of friends that I hung out with, we were like the misfits of, like, you know, so there was uh the hip hop kids that hung out, the surfer kids, the stoner kids. We went to a really we were close to Chinatown, so there was a large Asian population, and so there was those cliques, and we didn't really hang out with any of those cliques, but
So
you know we
is
smoked pot.
sorry, just to stop, it's
Yeah.
so like all those American high school movies, that's actually what American high school is like
Oh,
with
it's
those groups. The
so fucking
stereotype is true.
absolutely. You have the preppies, you know, the jocks, the stoner kids, the gangbangers, the fucking the whole everything. It's all real. And we were the oddball group, right? So we were the ones that they all fucking kind of. I mean, we got along with most people because we didn't cause any problems. But we just kind of didn't hang out with those cliques. Mostly we got along with the stoners and shit because we got weed from them, right? So
As you
you
do.
know, uh, but you know that is truly kind of how I've always been, and I see that from an outside existence in society. Where do you fit in when everybody's trying to make you wear a jersey?
Yeah.
And that's
And
really what it is.
I suppose so, in a way, are we within our larger society now trying to create these little groups that we used to have, but within it, which obviously doesn't work? So these little groups come into conflict with each other because they're all right next to each other, they're all in the same high school.
Yeah, I think that's a fair. So I think the United States is too large. I think you have too many conflicting types of people and ideologies that are just reluctant to see any middle ground anymore. Because what happens is middle ground gets you nowhere. Middle ground is where the mud is. In a tug of war of political ideology, the middle ground is the mud where nothing gets done. And the people suffer the most because the people pulling all the levers, of course, are the owner class. So they always win when things are not getting done for the people. When government's supposed to be representing the people and it's not happening, usually that indicates that you know the corporations and the wealthy are winning. Um, and you can't. They are very successful at manipulating and confusing people. Um, People are so stupid. I'm sorry. I don't care. I'm not a news outlet. I'm not trying to be a journalist. So fucking I don't care. People
Ah,
are
man, go for it.
people are stupid. They don't realize that all the marketing and the bullshit, not all of it, because I was a marketer and there's ethical marketing where you just inform people of their options and let them choose. That's ethical marketing. There's nothing wrong with getting your name out there and letting people know what you do. It's the manipulation of making people believe they need shit they don't need, or making them believe that the reason for their problems are somebody else that's totally not, black people, Mexican people, immigrants, now Afghan refugees are going to be part of your problem. All these, I saw some video at the rally, some little clip on YouTube, some woman was saying, oh yeah, they're busing these people in from Mexico and they're not checking them for COVID.
You see,
They're just
this is what I
spreading it all
don't
over.
understand. Sorry, just from
Yeah,
a British perspective with the US, right? So Britain has been like pretty much racist whitey island for thousands of years. But the US was founded on kind of immigration. That was the whole point of it. So where did it kind of go wrong and become so anti-immigration? Or is that more of a myth that it was founded on immigration and it was kind of almost acceptable and real slavery, you know?
It wasn't founded on immigration. It was founded on colonialism.
Yeah.
That's the difference. Okay. So colonialism is when you take yourself somewhere else and say, I'm going to stick a fucking stake in the ground and say, this is mine. Immigration, we view as immigration, but that didn't occur till much later. And it was after the white colonialists had come over and, started cutting off. What was the earliest? I think it was 1853 was the earliest immigration law. I might be wrong on that, but it had to do with Chinese immigrants. So right away, it was white people shutting the door behind them over here. And I believe that's kind of what the same thing. So you get the British who brought that shit over here. Sorry to say, that's your heritage. It's your fucking fault.
So
mine.
Sorry, what was this?
Are you there?
That's fine. I'm really sort of happy to take responsibility for all the evil in the world because the British Empire pretty much created a lot of it.
Yeah.
Oh, well, sorry, man. I'm zoning out again. I'll reconnect.
All right. So we got Freddie to accept responsibility for at least half of the evils in the world as a fair
there we go.
A fair peasant of the British Empire. He accepts at least partial responsibility for many of the ills in the world, and that's very kind of you, sir.
I never agreed to the British Empire.
Yeah. Well, I put a tweet out the other day that said, "Dear world." I don't know if you saw it. It was like, "Dear world, I didn't agree to any of this bullshit that's been going on. I was totally against it. They won't listen to reason. Don't blame me for it." As far as the U.S. goes, the U.S. just keeps doing shit to people around the world, and I've been against it every time. So don't blame me. And that's why I take great umbrage with the "we" comments anymore. When people say, "Well, we've done this, we've done that," oh, we mean fuck you. I mean, I ain't done none of that shit. I've been against you doing that shit, and you won't listen to me.
Yeah, fair point. Fair point. Here's an interesting one when it comes to like looking back again to independence, and maybe you can explain this. By no means am I an expert, but it seems like your founding fathers had almost an anarchist idea of the US, right? So kind of what went wrong with that? And what I mean by that is in terms of kind of the individual liberties and things like that. It was almost a kind of anarchist idea.
No, as a matter of fact, the 10 the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, they are amendments because they weren't included in the original writing. And the guy who was pushing for them, actually the same shit that happens in our political system, he was pushed aside and blackballed and all this other shit and excluded because he was trying to stand up for individual rights. And eventually James Monroe was credited for putting in the Bill of Rights, but it was this other guy who I can't even remember his name because he's not taught to us in history because he isn't credited with it. So the individual rights came on later because they realized they fucked up. That's what all the amendments are. They realized they fucked up and they didn't insure anybody individual rights. It was all states, which are corporations, right? And basically created a corporate structure for the government that didn't ensure any individual rights. And so those were an afterthought to appease the people. And I don't know if you're a South Park watcher or not, but the 100th episode, you ever seen the 100th episode of South Park?
I don't actually watch that. I used to watch it years and years ago, but no, I've probably never seen it.
Okay, so for anybody who's interested, just look up the 100th episode of South Park and try to watch it. It's an older because they're like, it's like they're on the 200 and something or 300th or something. They're way past that now. So it's one of their older ones, but it takes Cartman back through the dream kind of dream thing, right? Where he goes back at the signing of the Declaration of Independence and everything. And they were fighting over the Iraq War at the time. And so you had Randy and his side, I'm a little bit rock and roll. And then the other side, I'm a little bit country. And there was this feud going on. And what the determination that Cartman came to through his vision and dream was that the founding fathers wanted us to be able to go to war and wanted us to be able to protest it so that we could have our cake and eat it too. So the United States would allow its people to openly protest and have grievance with the things that it was doing, but it would go to war with Britain and show, great strength and might and power to the world, and it would have the best of both worlds. So because the argument was if we were just a bunch of peace-loving, tree-hugging pussies, then we'd get taken over by the world. And then the other argument is, yeah, but we don't want to be viewed as a bunch of dominant, warmongering, fucking patriotic shitbags. And so, but if you think about it, my God, that's absolutely, even in a comedy cartoon, that's absolutely the kind of dynamic that we live in, where our governments do exactly, especially the United States. In this current day and age, we've been a military might throughout the world. I think probably, I can't speak for the UK, but I would say more so than the UK. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, almost definitely. I mean, we're not much of a military might anymore.
Right. And we're just fucking popping off in Korea and Vietnam and, fucking Panama and Nicaragua and Venezuela. We're just fucking all over the place, man, just blowing shit up and leaving disaster behind. So back home, like I mean, I was like tweeted out who protested the Iraq and Afghanistan war. A lot of the comments where I did, but didn't do any fucking good. It's like, yeah, I know, it just cleared our conscience. That's all it did, because it's basically like the cartoon, yeah, we get to protest. We get to fucking paint on signs and go stand out on the fucking corner and have people honk while the shit goes on.
Well, this will give you some idea of how old I am here. When the Iraq War was happening, I remember I was sat in English class. I must have been about 13 years old, roughly. And just when Britain was about to kind of decide to go into Iraq. So my teacher, who was amazing, basically gave us a lesson on propaganda and how it works, and kind of showed us newspapers at the time, and basically said we'll almost definitely go to war with Iraq because all the newspapers are saying yes. And that's always stuck with me for, decades now after it, because that's so right. I mean, people literally do what the newspapers say. And that was the first time I'd realized that. And we're living in a world where most people still haven't realized that. They haven't had that English lesson in what you'd say is high school. And that's a little bit worrying, isn't it?
Well, it's purposeful. The same people who own I mean, in the United States, anyway, the same people who own our media have hands in on the textbook industry and everything. So they're cultivating the education and the narrative from a very early stage. They want people to have their faces in their devices and on TV. My entire generation grew up as a TV generation. That was your babysitter in most places. And so the idea that you know, and this all came about basically primarily with mass media, with television, especially with commercials, where you were able to really dictate an entire manipulative scenario onto somebody, to get them, to impel them to buy something that they probably don't need, sugar cereal, whatever the fuck it is. I mean, the commercials basically, and we see that with the Super Bowl, right? Everybody watches the Super Bowl to see the fucking commercials. What? I mean, what kind of fucking world are we in where commercials have become the most popular thing, and people will react to that? They will buy based on that. And so the media outlets, when you break down, I mean, only six companies own all the media that we see, all the information that we see. And to look at that and to say, oh, whoa, we're getting a fair shake, we're getting a fair, there's no way. I mean, there's just no way around it. Not when you look at the neo-feudalism that runs these industries, you know?
I go back and forward on this because in some ways I think we've never had this level of media kind of invasiveness into our lives before. And I mean, that's undeniable. We haven't. But at the same time, I mean, you look back at, well, at any time period, really, and
Right.
we've kind of always had people controlling the
Always.
narrative, right back to town
Always.
criers,
Yes.
but it
I
wasn't in your home. That
No.
was probably the difference.
Well, I mean, to some degree, yes. I mean, this is where mass media. Okay, so once mass media hit to where everybody could get information together and be on the same page, so to speak, right? Whether it was through radio. I mean, I say it really exploded with television because with the visual gave more emotional manipulation capabilities, right? So radio
Yeah.
only gave you the audio aspect of it. But with radio, commercialism really started exploding. With newspaper, then it exploded from that, right? So before the printing press, information was oral, more or less. It was really hard to get things written and passed along. So it was word of mouth, and so of course, you had a lot of confusion and everything. But you're right, the narrative and from the king down, if you were to go from that structure, would send out people to start telling the townspeople this is this and this is that, and planting people to start planting a narrative. You're absolutely right. I mean, and they know that's the psychology of humans, planting that seed and making it grow. It's been written about for thousands of years. So the problem is, and I don't know what the answer is, because social psychology, that's my forte, right? That's what I went to college for. That is my gift. Some people can draw, some people can play music. I'm a people behavior trends, like civilizational trends, and that I see it, I get it. And I don't know what the answer is to fixing people to just sit back and examine information for what it is and facts and want to accept that, because it is contrary to what they want to believe so much that they refuse to.
I don't think, well, I think we can identify the things that don't work. And I think the things that don't work is sort of contrary to what a lot of the kind of left and kind of progressive movement think, is trying to create a powerful counter message. And I think so much effort is wasted doing that. I mean, he says while recording, but a lot of effort is wasted doing that because you are never ever going to become anywhere close to the power of the mainstream message.
I agree. I think that as far as the left focus goes, I think the left focus just needs to be on building. I mean, you need to stop talking about it and fucking do it. Build co-ops. You want to be a socialist? Don't fucking put it in your Twitter handle if you don't know understand what it is. Quit fucking putting your this and a that and adhering to mainstream New York Times definitions of the shit. It irritates me. It really, and I'm talking to the Fred, and that doesn't apply. That's not a segue into this, but I think about that because I'm thinking of the Fred Hampton leftists, and I think about what Fred Hampton stood for. And, when I watched one of their streams yesterday, and, they're really talking about issues and what needs to be done. As I guess they're kind of an indie media outlet. They're trying to be kind of a talk show type media organization. And I've watched a couple of their episodes, and I've avoided most of that shit because it's all been this drama. Jimmy Dore this, and the fucking, TYT this, and Kyle Kalinske fucking hops in, and it's all this drama back and forth about, did you hear what so-and-so said? And then the Twitter stands are battling each other and hating each other and blocking each other all over
exactly the same. It's exactly the same with the UK left.
So I'm watching the Fred Hampton leftists, mainly Nick. I catch because I follow him. I've followed him for a long time, so I happen to catch his tweets when I look at my timeline, and I'll catch him live. And they're talking about shit. They're talking about, okay, so here's what we should be doing. Here's what we should be working. They're not talking about all this other bullshit between online independent media, quote unquote, celebrities. Basically, is what they've become. And so I like that. And I'm trying to get to have an interview with Nick myself to talk about our co-op, because I want to illustrate that this is what we should be doing instead of just fucking trying to get people elected and pumping all your time and money into campaigns and all this other bullshit. Just go do what needs to be done in the face of our opposition and start building it, and people will come. People will see the alternative. They will be attracted to it. They will say, oh, I get to have an ownership in this company and get an equal share for my time that I put in. Great. I'll fucking do that rather than go slave away for somebody who's going to make me piss in a bottle, 10 hours a day.
Yeah, it's the obsession again. I think we talked about this last week with top down, isn't it? I mean, the left and the UK are the same. The goal is to get elected, even though we've just had a kind of a phenomenon. It's almost like the rich and powerful kind of dropped the ball and let Jeremy Corbyn become leader of the Labour Party. So what Jeremy Corbyn showed is that the left in the UK wasn't dead. It was very much alive. It was massive. And then what happened was he had all of this support, everything kind of, I mean, the media were massively against him, don't get me wrong.
Right.
But we got showed that we had everything we were going to get in our favour, and we still got nowhere near government whatsoever.
Right.
So after seeing that, it's almost like, I don't know, just complete denial on the left's part, where they're thinking, oh, well, we'll try building smaller parties this time, or we'll try going a different route, and you just think you've just thrown everything you've got at it. You've just let everything loose, and it didn't work that way. So why you keep doing the same thing?
Right. And I keep trying to tell people that, and I was surprised to hear it yesterday on their podcast, was that politics follows the culture. It's not the other way around. You don't fucking change the politics to change the culture of the people. So in order to get the politics to represent the culture, you have to change the culture first. And then people will come out of that culture as, I mean, you don't get Marjorie Taylor Greens and fucking Brobarts and these nutcases that are in Congress without having people like them electing them. And so now we go back to the bigger clusterfuck. Like, how do you fix society? How do you fix people who are inherently broken? Goes back to what we were saying about our traditional values and everything else that we're raised with, and hating other people just for the sake of hating them. How do you get people to not do that? And again, the only way I see as humans is to start these, tribes of people who are successfully uh, presenting a different option that's not political, that is engaged in the communities, engaged in work, engaged in making decisions, maybe local politics, right? And eventually that will spread, because a lot of these conservatives, believe it or not, they go back to a time when co-ops, farmer co-ops, uh, utility co-ops, and things like that were the norm.
Yeah, it's universally popular. It's for a lot of people, it's not very popular when you call it certain names, but I think the actual thing itself is universally popular. And I think a lot of concepts that are kind of like prejudices and things like that, when you have a society or a community, sorry, on a much smaller scale, where everybody's needs are met and everybody feels like they have a stake in it, I'd like to believe that these prejudices do start to go when you have nobody that you're blaming for your problems,
Because
because
your
essentially,
problems,
yeah, you don't have the problem. You'll still have
right?
problems. Everyone's got problems, but you
Well,
don't have
I
the
mean, your
problems of
problems are
staying alive.
diminished. Your anxiety is diminished because you don't have to worry about fucking paying your bills, putting food on the table, whether or not your kids are fucking getting in fights at school because it's a dangerous environment, or whatever the case is. When you eliminate those anxieties, you have a tendency to get along with your neighbors, or at least want to say hi to them.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think in a lot of ways, it doesn't even have to be an threads when people see them. If we can kind of get it still happens in the same way, but this idea spreads horizontally, if you like,
Right.
to the
Yeah.
point where it erodes any power structure you have. A power structure can't stand on top of it anymore. When people start saying, well, no, they start saying, well, no, I'm not going to engage with that. I'm not going to pay for this thing. I'm not going to just not build this farm here because you've got some stupid says I can't because some rich guy who likes to play golf here sometime. And
Right.
the system will be gutted from the inside out. But the big thing is, there will never be a flag. There will never be a leader. There'll never be a group. So the media can't attack it in the same way they'll attack a political opponent like Corbyn or somebody like that. They can't attack it because nobody feels like they're all part of a giant national movement. Like they're a community.
Well, exactly. And I was thinking about this earlier because people are like, well, businesses in the same, because everybody wants to go resource, and all resources belong to everybody, and yeah, I get that, but that's maybe a few generations away. It's not about incrementalism. It's about changing the cultural mindset of people to adopt something like that. And so I think the idea of having workers be the democratized force, and because I don't want to make my own fucking clothes. I'm sorry. I would rather somebody who knows how to do that make clothes, and I can buy them from them. So there's going to be people that need services, and this goes outside of social services, outside of roads and parks and recreation, and schools and police and fire. That's social responsibility. I'm talking about transforming our economic business model to be equitable from the ground up, where if all the workers own it, then they're going to vote to pay themselves more. You don't have to worry about a union fighting the owners to fucking convince anybody, because all the owners are the fucking members. They raise their hand in a meeting and they all get to vote. And so when you transform that, when you take that first transformative step, and people people still want to go out to eat. People still want to be entertained. It's just, people still want information. So like Fred Hampton leftists, if they want to be a media outlet, they should be a media co-op, right? They should all share in the benefits and the work, and however many hours somebody puts in, they should be compensated fairly, directly, for that amount of time that they put in. And there's no questions about it. And when that equity starts coming in, and there's not somebody sitting at the top reaping all the benefits off of an idea, because nothing happens in our society without human labor, without
Yeah,
human involvement.
I think sometimes the community argument as well is kind of it's dismissed as though these communities never interact with each other. So, for example, my community, for example, we would be brilliant at growing food, but would be shit at making solar panels. For example, we
Right.
don't have any heavy industry here at all.
But it
But a
would be
city
awesome
might
if
have a
you had
factory.
solar panels on your fucking farm, right? So if the
Yeah,
solar panel people can, get, so you need to have your solar panels on your farm, and the people who are fucking making the solar panels need food to eat. It's a pretty consistent fucking level of thinking. Now, the idea is that we don't have big agriculture running the farm, sucking all the profits, canning up and processing food, and shoving shit off to people that isn't healthy, just for a profit. And then you don't have the solar panel, the oil companies owning the panel companies and charging the government outlandish prices while charging you outlandish prices at the same time.
yeah. And the problem that I'm not fully formed on this theory yet, but I'm starting to go in this direction. Mining itself. So if you take the solar panel and the farmer situation, right? The farmer's not going to need solar panels again for what, 25 years or something? He might need maintenance, but the guys making the solar panels are going to need enough food. So they would have to sell the solar panels so expensively that they'd be able to buy food for 25 years. Obviously, they have other customers, but in this kind of limited example. So at some point, either the farmer or the solar panel guy is going to need either a loan or they're going to need capital. And that's where it starts to, the guy steps in, the capitalist who has the capital that can do that. Without money, you might call this a crazy utopia, but the farmer just says to the solar panel guy, yeah, I'll grow enough food for you as long as whenever I need solar panels or maintenance, you're happy to do it. And that's the end of it. That's as far as the agreement goes. It's not even an agreement, it's almost an understanding.
Well, and that kind of gets us to the later stage of our development in the economic world, that a resource based economy, which people would consider bartering, but it's not really. I mean, currency, as we talked about, is it's a representation of value. It just represents a unit of measure of value, and so I don't think we're ever going to escape calculating our value in some denominated format. And it could be multiple, right? So as cryptocurrencies become more popular and people are accepting them on their phones, even though they're unstable and they don't act as stable currencies, there are stable coins, Tether and USDC and things like that, I think people still need to keep track. I mean, the earliest cuneiform tablets, I think, Randall Ray talks about this. The earliest cuneiform tablets of 12,000 years ago have been determined to be accounting measures, so they were calculating shit way back then and trying to keep track of how much of these nodes you had and whatever. So I don't see the idea of us eliminating a standard exchange valuation mechanism of like currency altogether in generations. I just don't see it happening, especially with the influx of cryptocurrency now and people thinking it's something it's not, while we see the gamification of society through it.
So what about society with debt but not money? I don't know if you're familiar with David Graeber.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He's a genius.
So he obviously pushes the idea, him and others, that debt comes first, money comes later. The debt was the first thing. So instead, we get our solar panel seller just basically issues a debt to the farmer that the farmer pays back in food over 25 years. And he says, right, these are worth, I don't know, 25 years worth of food, and you have this debt to repay me in that sense. Would that be as far away, do you think? So you're still using a currency in a sense.
Yeah. I mean, you're using your food as currency, and I can absolutely understand where those would be maybe manipulated with smart contracts, right? Where you keep an inventory of one side, and that's where Ethereum is leading the way, and why it's probably going to surpass Bitcoin in popularity, because it allows people to create apps for people to do this kind of shit. And eventually the next generation will just have everything will be on their phone, their car title, their home deed, everything will be on a wallet, some crypto wallet, where only they have access, and they'll be delivered through smart contracts and everything like that. So I think it's a possibility that people would find a mechanism to exchange outside of the governmental currency, and possibly do something like that. The only problem that occurs is, I guess, in your scenario is, 25 years for solar panels. Does that mean he's going to get new solar panels in 15 years when new solar panels are available? Or, is this 25-year just, what I'm saying? I mean, how do you set a valuation on something like that? And the ongoing, payment? What if the farmer wants to change his crop and the guy doesn't want the food that the farmer is giving? See, that's where you run into an issue is do you have an ongoing supply of whatever it is to make a continued payment in good faith for your agreement? And that would be what's difficult. So that's why we end up with the currency exchange. And that's why I see it hard to getting away from. Even with the debt comes first scenario, the debt may come first, but the means of exchange and taking care of the debt can be a multitude. It could be giving you 2 goats, or it could be giving you 5 pounds of sugar, or it could be giving you currency that you can then go and trade for your own goats and your own sugar.
So now the farmer would have to take out a loan, or he'd have to get capital somehow from someone bigger than himself. So if his crop fails or whatever, he loses his farm. I mean, so is it necessarily a worse system than we already have?
No, I'm not saying it's worse. I'm just talking about, I'm a logistics man. So it's my job to sit back and think of all the kinks and problems that could come out in the cogs and wheels of the mechanism running. So that's why
I'm
I bring up.
I'm a utopian dreamer.
Well, I dream of the utopia, but I know that there's steps that we need to take to get there, and you'll never get there. Just like in our cooperative, we've got steps that we need to take. We've got a large group of people, so everything doesn't go at my pace. I could have done a lot of the things that we're talking about doing a few times by now, but because it's decisions that take a group effort and group conscience, I have to be patient, and I have to wait for that cycle to work its way out and make sure that the decisions being made are fine with the entire group, so everybody's content moving forward. That's part of the democracy of our company, and you have to be accepting of that. You have to be accepting that something might go to a vote and you might lose the vote, and you're not going to stomp your feet and run off and quit your job. You're going to stay with it, and hopefully you win the next vote. And that's the cycle of things. And wherever there is the potential for financial success, I don't want to say success, wherever there is this, there's always the potential for exploitation. I don't know what I'm trying to say here.
Profit.
Well, yeah, I mean, profit, sure, but like our co-op isn't geared toward making, it's a profit-making entity, but it's not geared to making profit for shareholders and things like that. Any profit we make is for all of us, right? So the idea is, wherever you insert that, you possibly leave a door for exploitation, right? So there may be some members who want to exploit that system and who want to drive more and more profit. It's always about profit, because the more profit we make, the more share I get, more share I get, the more share I get. It's inevitable you're going to have members like that in an entity. And I guess the only fair way to look at that is, if that becomes popularized enough that other members catch on to that same thinking, and it overruns the entity to where everybody's just a bunch of money hungry, profiteering little shits, working, 80 hours a week to make more money. Whereas the original idea is to work less, make money, and enjoy the time with your family, because work isn't central to everybody's life, right? And that money is just a mechanism by which, we pay our bills and have a healthy living society. Then, if that were to happen, then that happens. And then you have to decide whether you want to walk away from that entity. There's nothing saying that something like that's never going to fucking happen in a system that you're setting up, because humans innately can be shitty. It's the truth. You're going to run into people who are going to do things that aren't right. And you can't plan every little step, every little measure around the actions of a what if. What if this happens? What if you can plan for things and say, okay, so if something like this happens, then we address it this way. But the what if could explode into something you weren't expecting, and it could be much more difficult. So what are you going to do? Are you going to, you're going to have to deal with it as it comes. But I guess where I'm getting at with this is you can't put the brakes on things because you're afraid of the outcome. And I think that a lot of what we're doing today, we see people, they want to strike. You see it over there. People are striking. They're getting sick of the top-down model, everybody making promises. Trickle-down doesn't work. We told you 40 years ago it doesn't work. You're now admitting it doesn't work, and you're not doing anything to change it. You're giving us more trickle-down. What the fuck? And people are getting pissed, and they're all taking to the streets. So what's going to happen? I don't know. I do know that unless there are functional alternatives to the capitalist models, there won't be any place for people to go. So that's why it's important to start supporting these cooperatives. There's rideshare cooperatives, right, that are trying to replace Uber and Lyft in places. And Uber and Lyft, they're having a battle about union and all this other shit. And I'm like, fuck them. Quit using them and go use these new ones. The drivers can join there. They can fucking get a fair share. Why are we even trying to maintain the big neo-feudalistic capitalist model to beg from them through a union? Please give us more crumbs, almighty one. Either take the fucking companies over as workers and have an equal share, no fucking IPO with shareholders and all that other bullshit, but employee owned, or fucking go use a company that's employee owned and transfer the culture of our business in the United States to something that's going to be, or around the world, that's going to be meaningful.
You need to use the last 20 seconds for the trailer, almost definitely. That would work really well.
I'll have to check it out.
I suppose.
Speaking of which, we're about that time. So what do you think?
Yeah, I was thinking that it's a good place to end. Join cooperatives. I think this is an idea we should probably explore a little bit more. Something I push quite a lot. Maybe not in so much of the business model, but yeah. But anyway, we can chat about that next week.
Well, right, and I understand you have your anarchist twist on things, and I think we should touch more on that because we didn't do this time. So let's remember, and we now have a recording to remember, that we're going to touch more on your anarchist beliefs and how that coincides with the socialist economic model, where you have a non-existent government, and how far away do we think something like that really is?
Cool. Sounds good, man. Well, thank you very much. Right. Good chat.
Sounds good, Freddie. This is the Clusterfuckers signing off.
Signing out.